While the rest of the cast is able to mess around with Z Reflect in its new perfect iteration, Videl is stuck with her dodge. So there has to be some sort of reward for her when she gets a perfect dodge timing, just like the rest of the cast has perfect Z Reflect. So Bandai has given her some extra meter when she performs a perfect dodge. As you can tell, it's not a whole lot of meter that you get. About like a quarter of a bar, I would say, overall. So it's something for Videl, but pretty much every situation that Videl has off of her Z Reflect or her form of it is going to be the same as it was in the previous patch, as opposed to some of the new strengths that other characters get with the additional 4 frames of advantage that a perfect Z Reflect would give them. Previously, there was only one behavior for Videl's standing unique attack. Gohan would pretty much always appear horizontally on the ground. If you now hold forward while you press the standing unique attack, so basically input 6S, this is the new behavior you get. The Great Saiyaman will now actually check the air. This would be nice to give Videl a little bit more nuanced neutral, potentially sniping out the opponent's jumps, or there might even be some new combos that originate from this. In fact, as you can tell, this from a 5H still works. Granted, so does just a normal 5S, so I guess you're not punished for using either version of the move. Previously, if Videl used her crouching unique attack against an airborne opponent, it wouldn't really track to their position, as Gohan would throw his Ki Blast pretty much straight along the ground. Now, if you perform this crouching unique attack and the opponent is at a high trajectory, there's actually some tracking that happens. As you can tell, Gohan suddenly knows how to throw a curveball now, and this is actually kind of nice. It just gives you the ability to track down the opponent a little bit more. Instead of the opponent being able to see these things and pretty much safely get out of the way, now Videl again has a nice another neutral buff that is able to allow her to interact with the opponent at higher altitudes than she could before. Both jumping heavy and jumping down heavy have some new behaviors when you perform them from a jumping unique attack, so let's take a look at how they used to behave. As you can see, Videl very much stayed in place in mid-screen off of jumping down heavy attack. Same thing with jumping heavy. This also applied, after using your smash launcher and stuff like that. Generally, this meant that if Videl wanted to add on some hits of her jumping unique attack to add on some more damage and meter build, she would have to be in the corner where these would actually link. Now, there's going to be a little bit of some weird coding things or something going on here, because I have to actually slightly talk about some things out of order when it comes to these jump heavy changes. So the patch notes say that the trajectory changes when performed from a jumping unique attack. But that doesn't seem to actually be happening in these instances. However, if you actually take a look at jumping unique attacks buff, then it all kind of comes together. So let's discuss jumping unique attack first. Jumping unique attack also has its own share of changes. We have to take a look at its old properties. Previously, it was about 17 frames startup, and it only had one behavior to it. Gohan would kind of appear in a stationary position, which, depending on the timing in which you press the move, would cause him to connect with the opponent at various heights. So let's take a look at jumping unique attacks buffs. It's faster now at 14 frame startup, but there's also a new version of the move that you can perform by pressing up. This 7, 8, 9 Ki Blast hits a couple frames later, but it also actually unlocks the jump heavy changes that we were talking about earlier. So now that we know that there's a new version of Jump Special, which also has a bit of different hits done to it. So you can see here that Goku kind of flies back off of the normal JS, but off of the upwards JS, if I'm able to execute it. It's a very weird input. You can see that he actually just pops straight up instead. This is actually the version of the move that has the new trajectories for jumping heavy and jumping down heavy. So if you use this version, you'll actually get the combo. However, there's got to be some kind of bug or something like that going on here with these moves and these versions. Because, while it does work like this, it doesn't all come together like you'd think. You'd think these changes would allow Videl to add in JS to her normal B and B so that she's able to just get a little more damage, get a little more meter build, right? But the problem is, more often than not, my double jump gets consumed. In fact, right there, for some reason, I was actually able to just get that normal version. But watch my height here. I inputted it incorrectly. Up. Nope, still didn't do up. Like it's kind of tricky to do. In fact, now I'm doing it like this. But right there, you saw that little rise out of Videl. Like, you can burn your jump pretty easily doing this input. And I'm trying to find, like, the best way to avoid this sort of happening here. I think you just gotta be very quick with your inputs. Once you get used to that. But once you see that come through, it's like, it's so finicky. On top of this just being like an ugly input in general too, like pressing up during your jump strings when you're risking, you know, burning a double jump you don't actually want to burn, just like right here. Like, why am I randomly burning my double jump there? As opposed to maybe like another case where I don't do that. Like, I'm trying to input this in a way where I can avoid this happening, but if I try to... The best kind of way it feels like to do it, input your S, immediately tap up, and then you can get the rest of this stuff. Like, cool, right? But it's just so damn finicky, right? And again, like, because you get the slower startup as well from this new JS, it is actually able to work in a B&B like this, but it's way too finicky, and I would rather, like, why not just, like, give these properties over to the current JS? You know, like, why not just make it work mid-screen? Why are we doing it in this very weird, roundabout way where all of a sudden I gotta be mindful of whether or not, like, I'm accidentally, you know, canceling some jumps I shouldn't be canceling, you know? Like, it's just a little too finicky for me, but now that I kind of get the secret sauce here, if you will, it's, you know, not bad. But, you know, depending on just how your inputs go, your timing, you can kind of just burn your double jump by accident. And I don't necessarily like that. While this is a buff for Videl, I think its implementation needs to be revisited, and I would love for them to do that in the next patch. Jumping down special has a new change too with a new input. First, let's take a look at how it used to behave in every single context. So, Great Saiyaman would always appear in front of the opponent and drag him down to the ground, and this could have some uses in Videl's combo games, either off of a jump down heavy launcher. However, sometimes linking off of this could be tricky. But it was certainly doable. Another very common time to use this move was at the end of your combos after a level 1 super to then link into a Dragon Rush. That's how it should look with immediate timing. Sorry for the bad takes here and there. I don't really play Videl that much. So what's the new behavior on her jumping unique attack? Well, if you hold forward while you do the input, so you're basically doing jump 3S, Gohan will now appear behind the opponent. Now, it does the same damage and has the same startup pretty much, so what's actually changing here? Well, it might, you know, just mean that, you know, you have combos where you have less collision with Gohan. And I kind of feel like sometimes it's easier to pick this combo up from the J3S. But, you know, it's still certainly all doable and whatnot. And I definitely had some situations where you get some new side swap stuff happening. So, like this, for example. You know, like, all of a sudden, GT Goku just gets completely pulled out of the corner. So maybe there's something that you want to do with your Moonsault kicks, right? But even then, the hit is like too fast for that to necessarily work. So I'm not really sure. I haven't really seen too much tech that's come out of this change. If I've missed something, let me know in the comments. Previously, the medium and heavy version of Videl Rush, when you use the aerial version, would cause a sliding knockdown. So pretty much these were just combo finishers for Videl. Now the medium version of Videl Rush gives you a ground bounce. You might be noticing that trying to get a combo off of this in mid-screen is a little long for man. But it is possible, so long as you press 5M. And if you press it early enough. So this is nice for Videl because all of a sudden now, if she gets some air-to-air hits like this, she can easily start going into some more structured combos that are able to increase her overall damage. So this is kind of nice and probably one of the better buffs that we've seen given to Videl in this patch. I like the change overall. Moonsault Kick actually has a couple of nice buffs to it. Previously, this was sort of a knowledge check and reaction check for the opponent to deal with. All of these moves had some invincibility to them. In fact, all versions were 4-frame invincible moves. However, the invincibility would wear off about the time that Videl actually swapped sides with you, meaning that you could potentially counter her if you were quick enough. The most common way of doing this was to use down heavy with a bit of a delay on reaction to beat this move. So because of that, this was a 4-frame reversal option that had some pretty strong counterplay that could lead to some great combos for the opponent. In addition to that, it was also very slow. The light version was 30-frame startup, while the medium version was 34 frames. And the EX version was also 30-frame startup. So plenty reactable, but this could be tricky, especially because Videl is not a popular character, and thus people might not be ready for this. So let's take a look at the new version of Moonsault Kick. All of them are still frame 4 reversals, despite having their invincibility lengthened, so this just means their iframes last longer. And you also see that it goes from full invincible to invincible. They are no longer invincible to anti-air attacks partway through the motion. So things like Cell's perfect attack here should be able to actually beat her pretty cleanly. And in fact, if GT Goku does the same 2H, you can still anti-air this pretty cleanly. However, it should be a little more difficult for you to do, considering that they all are a little bit faster in terms of their startup. Light version now hits at frame 28, medium at frame 30, and EX at frame 27. So mostly, like, outside of maybe a few niche interactions that I might not be aware of, this is fundamentally still the same move, just a little bit faster. So maybe this will work in a couple of combo routes that it didn't work before, and it might be slightly more effective at catching the opponent as a reversal option if they commit to moves that have too long of a recovery. But if you're patient play and you're able to react to Videl, all the old counterplay should still work, and there might even be some new counterplay depending on what anti-air tools your character has. Now we have to talk about probably the most notable change to Videl in this patch. And while everything that we've looked at so far has been a buff, many people would consider this nerf to be unwarranted and far outweighing all of the buffs and improvements that Videl has received otherwise in this patch. And we have to talk about her Level 1 counter super, Defender of Love and Justice, the Great Saiyaman, which ironically enough kind of is the protogenitor, along with UI's own counter super, to giving these counter attacks that some characters have combo utility. Previously, if you use this super in your combos the first time, the animation would play. So after you get this animation, all of your Great Saiyaman attacks that use Great Saiyaman would be buffed in terms of their damage, skyrocketing how much damage Videl could actually do in a lot of her combo routes, as well as skyrocketing the damage that her level 1 super could do to some pretty crazy heights. I mean, it was almost like 1,000 damage raw once you get into scaling, something like that. My exact number is not fully accurate, but this was like the core bread and butter game plan for Videl. Get to hit the opponent, use the Defender of Love and Justice Great Saiyaman super to strip away a bar of meter from the opponent, as well as get that guaranteed damage buff for Videl for the rest of the round. It was kind of reminiscent of what we were doing with Labcoat's old Level 1 command grab super back when you could combo into it, except it was a little healthier because it was just a damage buff for Videl, but it certainly was crazy strong. And the fact that you also stripped away the opponent's meter could give you potential to run away with the game, because if you won the point where, and your opponent usually had a bar of meter by the end of your first combo, you could take that bar of meter away so they couldn't have access to meter reversals or guard cancel or various other defensive resources. Instead, they just had to pretty much hard defend against your offense. Now, if you use Defender of Love and Justice Great Saiyaman in a combo, the animation no longer plays. Great Saiyaman will stay out on screen after you perform the super, but all of your special moves are disabled, and you can get the power-up if he stays out the entire time. However, while he's not interactable himself, if you hit Videl, Gohan stops. So the moment that you touch Videl, she loses the power-up, meaning that instead of getting a guaranteed power-up while also taking a bar of your meter away from you, Videl now has to try to keep you locked down long enough to earn the buff after she already hit the combo on it. That's the idea of this change anyway. And a lot of people aren't really too happy about that. Like, it's too many hoops to jump through. It's a risky investment of a bar of your meter that doesn't have nearly enough reward. If you do use the move as a counter move, you do get the animation as well as the meter penalty on the opponent. So all that still functions, but again, like, it takes this move, and instead of it being a proactive game plan of Videl, it's now a situational thing that she doesn't really get access to. And you might be thinking, well, what if you just... let me go this way instead. What if you just use it to kill the opponent's character, right? Gohan doesn't stay out. So even if you kill the opponent using the super move, it's not like all of a sudden Gohan does the whole dance off screen and you get the power up. Like, at least when, you know, I tested in this field, maybe in versus mode, it is different. So let's actually take a look at that. So just to make sure I'm dotting my I's and crossing my T's, let's take a look at this situation training mode. Oh, son of a biscuit, he didn't die. That's so cringe. Well, let's actually just knock him out right here. Let Gohan play in the background. Now, I didn't quite see the full power up there. And that damage doesn't look like it's buffed up either. So there we go. We finally secured the power up there. But yeah, it's not like you can KO the opponent's character and get this power up. Like, you're simply stuck, like, trying to make this work after you get the knockdown using that super on the opponent. So this really slows down Videl's ability to snowball the game. The last change is to Videl's C assist, which now becomes invincible faster during the startup of the move. So let's try to stress test this in the old patch first. Pretty much by the time that she disappeared, she was invincible. But as we saw, if you can catch her in the startup of the move, like around the time that she appears next to you, you could then blow her out of this, and that would feel kind of bad. But, you know, that was just part of the game sometimes. Now let's take a look at how fast the invincibility on Videl's C assist starts up. Pretty much when she appears next to you, and probably about the time that she's, like, landing on the ground, it almost seems kind of pretty instantaneous. Yeah, it seems like it's instantaneous, so pretty much, like, if you call this assist, it's going to come out, so you can actually potentially use this assist as a really good counter poke tool in neutral or against some block strings. So, pretty nice buff. Looking at the patch notes themselves, I kind of figured that Bandai's intent for Videl in this patch was to nerf the Defender of Love and Justice, the Great Saiyaman Super, because that was kind of like pigeonholing Videl into that one strategy of, let me get this level 1 buff as soon as I can, as well as just stopping, you know, players from snowballing very early with the character by stealing a bar of opponents from their key gauge, especially in early game situations where there only is a single bar built up. And in return for that, since they're lowering her access to her higher damage buff Saiyaman moves, was maybe trying to give her some new mid-screen routes and the things like that. What with the changes to the jumping heavy and jumping unique attack with its new version, as well as to a Videl Rush, which genuinely is a very good change. But, like, I think they missed their mark on giving those buffs. The changes to jumping heavy and jumping down heavy attack only working with the new version of jumping unique attack, as well as, like, how weird and buggy it is in terms of it burning your double jump. Like, it's way too frustrating for me to, like, really get around in some instances here, and maybe other Videl players have been able to deal with it. The fact that Moonsault Kick, like, yes, it is a little bit faster, but it's still kind of losing to the same things. I don't really see it as, like, a net change. It's sort of like a buff and, like, just making sure that some other things are applying, I think, just to be in line with its faster startup time. But I think that, you know, I get what Videl players have been saying, or what everybody else has been saying, where Videl is probably the most nerfed character of this patch, when she definitely didn't deserve it. Other characters have received nerfs as well, of course, but while they've received nerfs, I think that they are still very much functional. It can do what they can do, but Videl's big game plan was that level 1 super of hers. And now she doesn't have access to that game plan without gambling on the opponent, hitting her during her pressure and offensive sequence. Maybe there's just a way where you can safe jump, lock the opponent down, and keep it going, but it's taking extra steps with what was just a guaranteed thing before. Not to mention, too, that the opponent keeps their bar a meter, so they have that as an option to give them metered options to defend against her in these early game situations. The Videl Rush change is genuinely nice, but that's about it I can say positively for Videl in this patch, outside of also the buff to her C assist. So I'm hoping that when Bandai is working on this next patch, they've announced that it includes some Videl buffs. I don't think that they necessarily should fully revert the Great Saiyaman super nerf, but maybe finding some other ways to apply that buff or reworking it so that they can allow Videl to get that buff more consistently or easier, like shortening the time it takes for Great Saiyaman outside of the stance to give the power up to Videl. Maybe that's something worth exploring, but until then, I kind of get it now looking at Videl, because so many things that I thought worked one way just didn't work the way I anticipated them to, and that's kind of disappointing. I hope she gets some love in future patches.